Welcome to the Bakersfield College Paramedic Preparatory Course lecture on pathophysiology. My name is Nathan Klein, and we will be taking a brief overview of how the cells of our body produce energy and how that system can be compromised in various ways. While it is impossible to deep dive into this subject in the short time that we have here, I want to review with you what you have learned in EMT school concerning the subject of pathophysiology. Pathophysiology is the study of how the body is affected by injury and disease. In order to effectively assess and treat our patients in the pre-hospital setting, we must first understand why and how these events affect the tissues of the body. In order to do that, we need to zoom in, down to the cellular level, to take a look at how the cells function. Now, I know this illustration may look daunting at first, but we are going to just briefly touch on a few things here for context. Think of the cell as a tiny body. It has a brain, the nucleus, organs, called organelles, and it also has a skin called a membrane, which will regulate various substances coming in and going out of the cell through gates and pumps. Let us examine one of the ways in which these gates move ions into and out of the cell. All along the cell membrane are tiny pumps called sodium-potassium pumps. As the name hints at, these pumps move sodium out of the cell while bringing potassium into the cell. This is done to create the precise balance of electrolytes in order to perform the various functions of the cell. This pump is one of the ways the cells use adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. ATP is the fuel the cell uses to perform functions like powering sodium-potassium pumps or DNA production. ATP is produced in the mitochondria and makes use of glucose and oxygen. The oxygen itself is not strictly mandatory, but without it, the mitochondria can only produce 2 ADP for each oxygen molecule. Also, as a product of this anaerobic metabolism, the process produces lactic acid, which the body has a difficult time removing. When you feel the burn from a hard workout, what you are experiencing is your body trying to deal with the buildup of lactic acid. If the body continues to produce lactic acid, this will inhibit the cell's ability to function properly, and it will ultimately die. On the other hand, with oxygen present, the mitochondria can produce 36 ATP, with just carbon dioxide and water as its main byproducts. This is far easier to remove from the body as carbon dioxide is exchanged in the capillaries with oxygen. The carbon dioxide is then transported back into the lungs, where it is again exchanged and exhaled out. While there are other ways the body can get rid of carbon dioxide, this is the main mechanism of control. In our cardiac section, we will take a closer look at the circulatory system. Today, I just wanted you to have a surface level understanding of how the body produces energy and why an interruption in this perfusion will cause problems at the cellular level. Anytime the body's ability to perfuse blood from the heart and lungs to the tissues and back again, we use the term shock. Another way to think of it is that shock is essentially hypoperfusion. Robert Hardaway, a surgeon from Texas Tech University School of Medicine, once said, "Almost everyone who dies, except one who is instantly destroyed, must go through a stage of shock." There are so many ways that this hypoperfusion can manifest that we have categorized the causes into 4 basic classes. The first class I want to discuss is hypovolemic shock. If you think of the body as a container, then hypovolemic shock is when a significant portion of the fluid is lost. When this happens, the pressure of the blood in the container is reduced. Therefore, less blood makes its way back to the heart. This could be caused by uncontrolled hemorrhaging or through dehydration. One of the ways the body compensates for this is through peripheral vasoconstriction. The vessels in the arms and legs and other extremities will constrict, reducing the blood flow through them. This focuses more blood to reaching the vital organs and increasing the blood pressure, which in turn increases blood flow back to the heart. As we had discussed earlier, a lack of circulation reduces the amount of oxygen available to the cells. This causes those cells to produce more lactic acid, which will have a cascade effect of accelerating cell death. If this type of shock is not treated, the body will no longer be able to compensate with vasoconstriction or tachycardia. It should also be noted that the areas affected by vasoconstriction will also begin to suffer hypoperfusion unless the hypovolemia is abated. The next type of shock we want to look at is cardiogenic shock. In our container analogy, our container has a pump which circulates the blood. In cardiogenic shock, the blood volume is normal, but instead the pump is damaged and unable to pump effectively. This could be due to events such as a heart attack, which damages the muscle, trauma to the heart itself, or even medications which interfere with the heart's ability to pump. Vasoconstriction is, again, one of the ways that the body will attempt to compensate, but this is only a delaying tactic and will not work for long. A related category of shock is obstructive shock. Here, the container has enough blood volume and the pump is working just fine. The problem is we have something blocking the flow of blood either to the body or to the lungs to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide. Examples of this blockage is a pulmonary embolism. This is where a blood clot has lodged in one of the pulmonary vessels, blocking the flow of blood into and out of the alveoli. Another cause of obstructive shock is a tension pneumothorax. Here we have an increase in interthoracic pressure, which inhibits the flow of blood through the chest. A heart attack is an example of obstructive shock that causes cardiogenic shock as the muscle tissues die from hypoperfusion. The last form of shock we want to talk about is distributive shock. In distributive shock, the volume hasn't changed. The pump is working. There are no obstructions. The problem here is that the container has gotten bigger. This works in much the same way as hypovolemic shock, as a reduction of blood pressure reduces the return of blood to the heart. There are several ways that distributive shock can occur. One of those is damage to the central nervous system. In neurogenic shock, the body's ability to regulate the size of its vessels is inhibited by damage to the spinal cord. The vessels dilate, which then decreases the blood pressure. Unfortunately, unlike in hypovolemic shock, the body is unable to compensate for this since the pathways for those instructions have been damaged. Another type of distributive shock is sepsis. Septic shock occurs when the body is trying to fight an infection, pulling fluid to the site in conjuncture with a decreased ability to compensate for the shift in fluid due to illness. This is common with large infections like appendicitis or pneumonia, where large amounts of fluid are pulled into the lungs or abdomen. The last type of distributive shock we will talk about is anaphylaxis. This is caused when an allergen enters the body. The body overreacts to this with large-scale swelling, which pulls fluid from blood and into the interstitial tissue. This increased pressure on the tissue also causes hypoperfusion of the affected area. Anaphylaxis can even compromise a patient's airway if the swelling is located there. Thankfully, this is one type of shock that EMTs have an effective treatment for. The use of epinephrine is very effective in reversing this type of shock. I believe that it is very important as you prepare for paramedic school that you start to think about the calls you run from this cellular level. With a good understanding of the micro, we can make the best decisions in the macro. I want to thank you again for spending this time with me to review pathophysiology. Have a great day.